Hey, what is up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Knighton Runs podcast. And in this episode, I want to talk a little bit about the new Knighton Runs pace and intensity chart that I created as part of the Complete Marathon Training Program. So, one of the biggest things that you can do to become a better runner is include a lot more variety into the paces that you run throughout the week. In addition to things like simply running more often, knowing when to run hard and when to run slow is super important and is going to really drastically increase how quickly you improve as a runner, and it's going to help you break through plateaus. Varying the intensity throughout the week is so important that whenever I work with an athlete and there's someone who's just been going out there and running and not putting that much variety into their running, as soon as they start to do variety throughout the week, they immediately start to improve. And then after the course of a few months, they're in a place where they're generally breaking PRs and doing things that they were never quite capable of before. When you're learning how to run the right way, it's important to understand the purpose of every run you're doing, have a clear name to the types of runs you're doing, have a clear name for the paces, and you should know exactly how they should feel. It's a common mistake and it's a beginner mindset to think that simply running harder is better, and that if a workout says go this pace, that if you can exceed that, it's also better. Neither of those things are true. There's a clear reason why we run slow. There's a clear reason why we run moderate. And there's a specific reason why we run fast. They all play a role in training, and each piece is basically a piece of a puzzle that when they all come together, it makes the full picture. When you miss certain pieces, like if you only run slow, you don't complete the full picture. You're missing some of the pieces. If you only run moderate, which is what most folks do, you don't get the full picture. And if you only run hard, you don't get the full picture either. You need it all in there in the right balance to complete the puzzle and create the full picture of being the best runner you can be. So I developed a chart and I'm going to share it for those watching the video of this. If you're just listening to the audio, I'll do my best to explain it. But you can check the link in the show notes to see the YouTube version of this video if you want to see the chart as well. So I'm going to start to do a screen share here. And let me just open up my browser quickly. All right, so I'm going to open my browser. All right, now here we go. So the Knighton Runs pace and intensity chart. This is the full version of the chart, and this is included within the Complete Marathon Training Program that I've released on my website. But I'm first going to start with kind of an easier to digest version of it. It's a little simpler. And this is what I would generally share on social media when people just want, a quick little overview. So here we go. On a scale of 1 to 10, you can give each of those intensities, 1 out of 10, 2 out of 10, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 10 out of 10. You can give them all a name, and they have a specific training focus as well. So what is the name for each pace and what is the focus? Well, the vast majority of running that you're going to do is what's commonly referred to as easy pace running. Easy pace running, most new athletes get this wrong. They don't really run easy enough. They generally run kind of a moderate pace. But one of the first things you want to learn as you start to put more variety into your training is you're not going to do that much moderate paced running. Instead, you're going to do about 20% of your running pretty hard and about 80% of it at a much easier intensity. Now, easy paces is really everything from what feels like a 1 out of 10 all the way up to a 4, maybe pushing into a 5 out of 10. And again, this is what you're going to want to do for about 80% of your weekly running. How should that look? Well, for most folks, let's say you're running 5 or 6 days a week, you do 3 or 4 of those days easy, and maybe 1 or 2 of those days with some hard running in it. Get more specific with it. Think about how many miles per week you're running. Let's say you are running 40 miles a week, because that's kind of easy to do the math on. You would do 20% of those harder. That's 8 miles. And you would do 80% of those miles easy. And that's about 32 miles. Now, that it's more complicated than just that. It's an oversimplification of it, but kind of gives you a general understanding of how much harder running you should do versus how much easy running you should do. So I would say 1 out of 10 effort for running wouldn't really even be running at all. That's just walking. Maybe jogging extremely slowly feels like a 1 out of 10. Once you get into the 2 out of 10 effort, this is like what we would call jogging or a recovery pace. In between harder workouts, in the days between harder workouts, you need to recover between those workouts. How hard you do a easy run or a recovery run, which falls between hard workouts and a long run, that's going to depend on how well you feel on the day. But generally, it's going to be somewhere between this jogging effort, 2 out of 10, all the way up to kind of easy effort, but like a feel-good easy effort, which would be 3, maybe 4 out of 10, but not harder than that. It needs to be easy to recover between the harder efforts. 3 out of 10 is kind of standard easy day pace. Great weather. This all assumes great weather. If it's hot and humid, all these paces get shifted up. I mean, running when it's 80 degrees out and humid, even if it's easy, it's hard to even go that easy, but maybe it should still feel like a 4, maybe a 5 out of 10. You want to really try to keep it certainly below 5 under 10 or under. Certainly, this cannot be hard for the vast majority of your running. You need to remember that to improve as a runner, you want to run more miles, and it's better to do more miles comfortably than it is to do less miles but harder, or risk hurting yourself because you're running too hard all the time and therefore not able to run as many miles. So just relax and make sure your easy pace is 2, 3, 4, maybe on, if you feel really, really good, all the way up to 5 out of 10. Now, marathon pace would be the next pace above easy pace. Marathon pace is not a hard pace. I mean, for all of us, running a marathon takes well over 2 hours. Most of us well over 3 hours, maybe over 4 or 5. But for most of us, if we are maybe not if you're a beginner runner and training for your first marathon, but if you're a bit more experienced, or you're a bit fitter than maybe a brand new runner would be, marathon pace is gonna be faster than your easy pace. Unless your goal is to just finish the marathon, in which case you are probably just going to run easy to the finish. You're probably going to be pushing yourself and running a little bit harder than you would on a normal easy day. And that would be your marathon pace. But again, it's still not that hard. It's something you need to hold for hours. So when you're fit and when it's good weather, marathon pace should feel like a 5 out of 10. I will say that during heavy training, when you're more fatigued, or if the weather is bad, hot or humid, marathon pace could feel a lot harder. It could feel like even a 7 out of 10, perhaps. If it's really bad weather, maybe even harder than that. That is okay. And just keep in mind that if your training goes well and you have good weather on race day, marathon pace will feel like a 5 out of 10. The next notch up from that is half marathon pace. This is generally going to feel like a 6 to a 7 out of 10. Now, half marathon pace, obviously a little bit faster than marathon pace, but still you're going to be holding this for well over an hour, maybe over 2 hours. So it's again, it's only like 6 or 7 out of 10 effort. Then we move into 10K pace. 10K pace is kind of like 7 to 8 out of 10 effort. These paces, they kind of get squished towards the top in terms of intensity, especially as you get fitter. But it is important to recognize the variation here and kind of think in your mind like, ooh, I'm going to run 10K pace. Okay, that's 7 to 8 out of 10. And then we're going to go up to 5K pace. 5K pace is a little faster than that. This for most folks is going to be like 8 out of 10, 80% effort. 5K, you're only being able to hold this pace in a race for, maybe like 15 to 35 minutes, depending on how fit you are. Maybe 20 something minutes, something like that. This is getting pretty hard. And the faster you are, the harder all of these paces are. Someone who's running, let's say like a 17-minute 5K, their 5K pace is going to feel a lot harder relatively than someone who's going to be running like a 30-minute 5K, just because they need to exert themselves a lot harder for a shorter amount of time than someone who is covering a 5K in 30 minutes. For them, it's still a hard effort, but they're exerting that same effort for 30 minutes, whereas someone doing it in like 17 is working harder to cover the distance in 17 minutes. As we move up from 5K pace, you're going to get kind of into your track racing paces. 1 mile race pace is generally what I will say. And now 1 mile race pace, this is like a 9 out of 10. This is certainly not a sprint. It is restrained, it is controlled, but think about how fast you could run a mile. For most of you listening to this, it's going to be somewhere from maybe a little under 5 minutes, all the way up to maybe 10 minutes or a little more than that. It's a pace that is very, very fast. I mean, to run a mile all out is going to be extremely hard, but definitely not a sprint. You can hold this for, 4 to 5 minutes, all the way up to 10 minutes or slightly more. Above that, you're getting into your sprints. So this would be like the finishing kick at the end of a race. Maybe you have a quarter mile to go, or 30 seconds left to go, and you really get into a sprint. You're going all out. Sprinting, our bodies only really have the ability to sprint all out for 30 seconds or so before we're forced to slow down just physically, biologically. So sprinting is all out 10 out of 10. If you're not giving a 10 out of 10 effort, 100% effort, you're not sprinting. You're not going all out. You're not firing your nervous system at its fastest speed. You're not engaging all of your muscles at your fastest speed. If it's not 10 out of 10, it's not sprinting. Sprinting is something we do very rarely as distance runners. You may do it a little bit to develop your top end speed as an alternative to strides, which are a bit slower. And it's something that, at the end of any distance race, we all become sprinters in that finishing kick in the last few hundred meters. But this is what a 10 out of 10 effort truly is. Now that I've gone through the different pace ranges, you should think, okay, when I go out on a regular run, what would I rate my perceived effort level as? Just a regular easy run. Let's say you go out for 5 miles or half an hour, perhaps. What would you rate that? Think of your last run. You weren't trying to run particularly hard. You didn't have a specific workout in mind. You were just running easy, comfortably, a normal run, we'll call it. What would you rate that? would you rate it 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 out of 10? But I'd like it to be more like 3 or 4. If you're thinking, no, it was probably harder than that. If you're thinking, it was probably 6 or 7 out of 10, maybe 8 out of 10, then I want to say, stop and pay attention to this. If you're doing that, you're probably the type of person who goes out and does the vast majority of their runs moderately hard. That's the biggest mistake runners do when they're looking to improve. If you're someone who goes out and runs moderately hard all the time, or the vast majority of the time, you're going to see a ton of improvement by implementing a more polarized running system where you run about 80% of your runs very easy, and you run about 20% of your runs much harder than that. If you think about, some of the last workouts you did, maybe you are doing more advanced workouts like the ones I teach through my coaching and through my training programs. Think to, maybe you did a tempo workout. So tempo is going to be in the range of like 5K pace for slower runners, 10K pace for faster runners, all the way down to like marathon pace for most folks. Tempo is a range, and how fast you go kind of depends on the workout and depends on the day. But think of your tempo workouts. Do they generally feel like, let's say, 6 to 8 out of 10? That's how they should feel. And next time you run one, try to give it an intensity. Say like, okay, I know I'm supposed to be doing half marathon pace here. This should feel like 6 or 7 out of 10. Next time you do strides or mile paced repeats, same pace there. Think, okay, this should be a 9 out of 10 effort. Remember that it's not an 8. It should be harder than that. If it's only 8, you're probably a little lazy. But it's definitely not a 10. It's not a sprint either. Running mile pace or running strides is all about running with good form to improve as a distance runner. And when we're sprinting all out, your form is going to degrade a little bit on the longer distances that we're trying to do as distance runners. So those are the different effort levels. And I encourage you, next time you do a workout, try to match up your perception of how hard it is, 1 to 10, based on the description of the workout and what you're supposed to do on that day. On your next easy run, try to make it a 3 out of 10. On your next recovery run, try to make it a 2 out of 10. Maybe on your next long runs, it's good to kind of be on the faster side of the easy pace spectrum. Maybe make that like a 4, maybe pushing into a 5 out of 10 if you feel really good. And I think once you get really comfortable with this system, it's going to help you run a lot better. You're going to run a lot more within yourself, a lot more controlled than if you simply rely on the pace on your watch. Now, before I move away from this topic, I just want to talk about the specific training focus of all of these different paces. It's important to know the purpose behind the different workouts you're doing. And I'm just going to move quickly through this. So the slower paces, 3, 2, 1 out of 10. This is easy pace running, recovery pace running, jogging, even walking. Really, the goal here is to improve your aerobic and skeletal muscular strength. Just simply covering distance is going to make you a fitter, stronger athlete. Doesn't matter how fast you go. Running more is running better. And it's going to help build a base that's going to support the smaller quantity of high intensity work that I'll talk about next. So 4 out of 10 or 5 out of 10 effort, this would be like long run pace or marathon pace. This is all about developing endurance for the marathon. So training specifically at marathon pace will build specific endurance for the marathon. It's going to teach your body how to run that pace specifically. Running slightly slower than that is very good as well, and you should definitely do that for probably the majority of your runs if you're looking to run a faster marathon. This is going to build general endurance for the marathon. Maybe you're a minute slower per mile than your marathon pace, but you're still covering 16, 18, 20 miles. You're building the strength to cover the distance and preparing yourself to cover that distance when you then have to do it faster in the race. All the paces above marathon pace are going to develop your speed for the marathon, and it's going to help make marathon pace more comfortable. So half marathon pace, 6 out of 10, even 10K pace, 7 out of 10. This is speed development for marathoners, but it's also going to help develop some specific endurance for the marathon. Not only is getting the faster leg turnover going to help make marathon pace feel a lot easier, doing intervals faster than marathon pace, but still longer intervals, things like mile repeats, 2-mile repeats at half marathon pace, or maybe even 10K pace. These are going to build the specific endurance you also need for the marathon. So we get faster than this. We're more just developing speed. 5K pace for the marathon is pretty fast to train at, but doing some efforts at 5K pace is helpful at different stages throughout training. This is really going to help improve your speed for the marathon. Not so much your endurance, but definitely your speed. And then as we get into mile pace running and maybe even a little bit of sprinting here, this is really all about improving your running form and your top speed. So this is something that is important to do in very small doses when marathon training to make sure you're continuously working on your running form and working on your top speed. But since it's so far removed from the specific demands of the marathon, it's just a very small sprinkling of intensity that you would put into your overall training. All right, so that is the pace and intensity chart. And if you would like to dig more into this, you can watch this video on YouTube if you are not already. And then if you want to start following training that's based upon the philosophies I'm describing here, you can go to my website, knightonruns.com. I actually have a new program that I want to share with y'all today. It's called the Complete Marathon Training Program. And it's an 18-week marathon training program that I developed based on all the concepts that I've learned and the experiences I've gained coaching athletes over the past 5 years, put into one program that you can get and start following today. So, if you're a little unsure about how to best train for your next marathon and want to make sure you go about doing it the right way, you can download the Complete Marathon Training System off of Knighton Runs. And, rest assured that you've got a great program that's worked for hundreds of my athletes. We've seen a lot of success in this. People have PR'd and even won races using this kind of training. So if you want to check it out, I'll have a link in the show notes and the description below. And if you're listening to this before September 30th, I actually have a special promo code for you. It's launch 50. And if you put that into checkout, you'll save 50% off the marathon training program. If it's after September 30th, then I encourage you to go to my website and you can download a free copy of my marathon training guide. And if you do that, then you'll actually get an additional discount code for the training program as well. All right, so that is it for today. That's the Knighton Runs pace and intensity chart. And I think that this is going to be really helpful when it comes to conceptualizing all the different training paces and understanding, how fast you should be running at different times, and being able to learn how to give kind of a clear name to each pace that you're doing and understand how it all fits into your overall training program. Hope this helps. If you learned something from this, I'd love it if you gave me a little bit of feedback and let me know. And I hope your running is going well. Until next time, it's been Coach Chris on the Knighton Runs podcast, and I hope you have a great day.